Welcome back to another FPL video and podcast. This will be the predicted lineups for Game Week 3, and there are a lot of press conferences going on for the Thursday and Friday, so keep your eyes peeled because there could be some big updates. Certain players might get injured in training, or they picked up an injury midweek during the Carabao Cup games, and that's where the updates in the comment section will come in handy. And throughout the deadline stream, I'll probably provide some updated lineups if there are a lot of changes from what I discussed today. Smash the like button and subscribe for new if you enjoy my content. Let's try to get this to 300 likes and let's keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. On screen you can see Drafthound and their predicted lineup for Aston Villa, and spoiler alert, it's very similar if not identical to what I'm going for in terms of the villains and how they would line up in Game Week 3. But we're going to start off with Arsenal, work our way up through alphabetical order, discuss the upcoming fixtures, price changes, and of course, the most likely starters in Game Week 3. I would expect one change for the Gunners, with Leandro Trossard coming in for Martinelli. Now, for both game weeks so far, I have put Trossard in the lineup and it hasn't turned out to be that way. So let's wait and see if I'm third time lucky with Leandro Trossard, who came off the bench and scored the opening goal in that 2-0 victory at Villa Park. And he made a big difference when he came on, not just a goal, but he also played a pivotal part in the second without even getting the assist. And I think his positioning and the finishing can really help Arsenal. Martinelli hasn't really been at it in the opening part of this season. He might tie defences, and that's where the benefit of starting him could really come into play. And Trossard has the most ability in terms of changing a game from the bench, so it wouldn't completely surprise me if Trossard was yet again not starting, but I think this is his time against his former club in Brighton. He scored against them last season at the Amex, and the next 4 fixtures are very tough for the Gunners, but there is a big break between the Brighton fixture and the North London derby, with, of course, the international games going on over the next few weeks. But I would expect Raya to be in goal, and he could go up in price to 5.6 million very soon. A back four of White, Saliba, Gabriel, and I think Timber will keep his place. He played fairly well against Leon Bailey last week, and there could also be the possibility of Calafiori or Zinchenko. Arsenal have so many options in this position that it becomes probably the most difficult part of this team to predict, alongside the left winger spot, which I'm currently giving to Leandro Trossard. The three midfielders would be Partey, Odegaard and Declan Rice, with Kai Havertz up front and Saka on the right-hand side. So with the Gunners, the best FPL assets for me would be Saka and any of the Arsenal defenders, particularly Saliba, Gabriel and Ben White. And I personally think David Raya is the best way of covering them defensively at this moment in time. Coming in at 5.5 million, he's nailed on, and you won't have any uncertainty of starts. Now, with Arsenal's injury problems, Gabriel Jesus did pick up a groin injury in the build-up to the Aston Villa game, and he is still a doubt for the Brighton fixture. Kieran Tierney and Tomiyasu are also ruled out. They might return after the international break, but I wouldn't count on it, and it wouldn't surprise me if one of them was injured for several months. Aston Villa are top of the fixture difficulty rating until Game Week 8. They have some fantastic FPL assets as well, even if some of them are off form, like Ollie Watkins, who missed 2 big chances last weekend, but I'm expecting him to put things right. There is the slight possibility of Duran starting in his stead for Game Week 3, but this wouldn't be a long-term thing because Ollie Watkins has a lot of credit in the bank. He had a terrific campaign last season with 19 goals and I believe 17 FPL assists. Dibu Martinez will start in goal, and he'll be a very popular goalkeeper over the next few game weeks. And Nedeljkovic, a 4 million starting right back who's only 18 years old, should come in for the injured Matty Cash, and the Polish international will probably be injured for the next month or so, and that's when Nedeljkovic comes in. Now, in Game Week 1, I discussed the possibility of Diego Carlos partnering Pau Torres and Konsa being shifted to right back. That is a possibility from time to time, but Unai Emery discussed his preference for playing Nedeljkovic at right back and just any players in their natural position. He also discussed Konsa as doing really well at centre back, and he probably plays better in that position. So I'm going for a back four of Nedeljkovic, Konsa, Pau Torres and Luka Dean. But just like with Arsenal, I have some issues with this left back spot because I believe it's only a matter of time until Maatsen breaks into the starting 11 and usurps Luka Dean. But I'm going for the Frenchman right now. Possibly after the international break, we could see a change in this position. I'm going for a midfield four of Bailey, Onana, Tielemans and McGinn, with Morgan Rogers just behind Ollie Watkins. Now, there is the possibility of Rogers being benched from time to time, but based on his first 2 performances, I think it'd be very harsh if he was dropped to the bench, and he could do really well against Leicester away and also in the next few fixtures against Everton, Wolves and Ipswich Town. He has also gone up in price to 5.1 million. He's one of my top recommendations to buy this week, despite the 2 blanks so far, and I think Aston Villa have so many options. I would definitely recommend Nedeljkovic as a 4 million defender. Konsa and Pau Torres are fairly decent at 4.5. I wouldn't recommend Luka Dean because I believe Maatsen could take minutes and starts off him. And in the midfield, Bailey and Rodgers are definitely the standouts, and I'd probably give the edge to Rodgers at this moment in time due to the sheer price difference between the two. And then Ollie Watkins up front. He will come good eventually, as I discussed in my Transcripts video on podcast. Bournemouth have just signed Kepa Arrizabalaga on loan, and he could become the #1 goalkeeper as soon as Game Week 3 in that fixture against Everton away. But I'm going for Neto in goal at the moment. I think this will change after the international break, and the back four of Ronald Araujo, Sabani, Senesi and Kirkes. The Argentine did come in for Howson at left centre-back, but he's also gone down in price to 4.9 million. I've also gone for a midfield pivot of Christie, who also went down in price to 4.9 million, and Lewis Cook, and an attacking four of Semenyo, Kluivert, Tavernier and Evansson. Now, several of these players can play multiple positions. Semenyo can play up front as well as on the right, and also Kluivert can play on both wings, but particularly on the right. And he's also been used mainly as an attacking midfielder in pre-season and, of course, in his Premier League appearances so far. And Tavernier can play on both wings, and I think this will be the setup for Bournemouth. But there's also Sinistera and some decent players like Billing on the bench who could also make a claim for a starting spot in Game Week 3, not to mention Ouattara on the right-hand side. But Everton away next looks like a great fixture. They're bottom of the league with 7 goals conceded and none scored. That will be a very interesting game to watch. Now, Bournemouth have a pretty poor record against Everton in recent games in terms of Goodison Park, so let's see if they can change that for the better. And in terms of injuries, it's the same as before. Unal, Adams and Brooks are unavailable, but there is the chance that Unal could make the squad in Game Week 3. Brentford have the same 4 injuries as before in Joshua Da Silva, Rico Henry, Aaron Hickey and Igor Thiago. Now, 1 or 2 of them, like Rico Henry, could be available in Game Week 4 after the international break, whilst others, such as in the case of Joshua Da Silva, might be out for several months, and we're looking at November as a possible return for that particular player. But in terms of the lineup, I'm going for Flecken in goal, and I would definitely recommend Brentford players in Game Week 3. The problem is you've got Man City straight afterwards, and even Tottenham away is very difficult, particularly for the defenders. I'm going for a back four of Ruslev, Collins, Pinnock and Ayer, and a midfield three of Norgard, Jensen and Janelt, which seems nailed on at the moment, but it could be only a matter of time before Fabio Carvalho breaks into that starting 11, especially when Brentford want to play a very offensive lineup. I've gone for Mbumo, Wissa and Schade. Now on the left, I think it's a bit less nailed on, and we saw Schade benched in Game Week 2, but Wissa and Mbumo will start week in, week out. They're the 2 standouts from Brentford overall, and in third, I would go for Flecken as the best 4.5 million goalkeeper at the moment. As always with Brighton, there's always a few uncertainties with their starting 11, and that's only intensified during midweek, where Verbruggen made his return in the Carabao Cup, a 4-0 victory for Brighton. And also Hössler, in his press conference earlier on Thursday, the 29th of August, he said that he's got a clear number 1 in mind and there'll be no rotation whatsoever. And I believe Verbruggen will be that number 1, but I'm going for still in goal at the moment, and we'll probably see the goalkeeper change in effect from Game Week 4 onwards after the international break. But don't be surprised if Verbruggen starts in goal against the Gunners, and I'm going for a hybrid back 3 or back 4 of Veltman, Dunk, Van Heck and Hinselwood. But it looks like in all the games so far, Brighton have played a 4-2-3-1. This is Hössler's favourite formation though, a 3-4-3, which is done before he even joined the Premier League. I'm also going for Milner and Gilmour as the 2 central midfielders, Minter on the right, and a front 3 of Mitoma, Welbeck and Joao Pedro. But there could be some changes in this Brighton lineup depending on the opposition, and rotation is definitely a possibility. Now, if Weaver is available, I could see him starting over Billy Gilmour, but it all depends on his fitness. It's not looking too promising at the moment, but we don't know enough about that situation. As for March, O'Reilly and Gruder, they are all out. Gruder has a slight chance of making the squad in Game Week 3 or 4. Unfortunately, O'Reilly suffered a horror injury in midweek and hopefully returns very soon, but it doesn't look good for him in particular. Brighton have spent a lot of money in this summer. They've also signed Kadilogu, and you've got Estupiñán returning from injury. He's fully available now, and he could even start at left wing back or left back instead of Hinsel would. The next 4 fixtures are actually quite mixed bag because you've got Ipswich and Nottingham Forest at home. Those look amazing, but Arsenal away does make things a bit cloudier and it doesn't look that good for the defenders. But I still think Brighton boast a lot of good FPL options. Even Lewis Dunk at the back could be decent. If Verbruggen becomes the number 1, I'd highly recommend him as a 4-point family and goalkeeper in the long term. But Brighton's medium to long term fixtures aren't necessarily that great. So despite Ipswich and Nottingham Forest coming up very soon, it's not really ideal to buy Verbruggen just yet. And then up front, you've got the likes of Matoma, who for me is one of my favourites, and Danny Welbeck is someone I've been recommending recently in the best wildcard team videos and podcasts. I've said this before, due to the sheer number of players Chelsea have, especially in certain positions like the wingers, it becomes very difficult to predict their starting 11. But I'm going for Robert Sanchez in goal, and just around a week ago, Maresca said he is the number 1 goalkeeper in the Premier League for now, but Jorgensen played very well in the Europa Conference League, and it wouldn't surprise me if he pipped Sanchez as the number 1 goalkeeper in a couple of weeks or months' time, but not in Game Week 3. The back 4 seems fairly settled, with Gusto on the right, Cucurella on the left, and a centre-back partnership of Colwill and Fofana, with Enzo Fernandez partnering Caicedo in the midfield, Madueke on the right, fresh off that hat-trick against Wolves, Palmer down the middle, Pedro Neto on the left, and Nicholas Jackson up front. Chelsea also have enticing fixtures until Game Week 7, and Cole Palmer is by far the best option the Blues have to offer, but Madueke is currently the most transferred in player of anyone in the Premier League, and he's still someone decent you could go for as a 1-week punt, but I don't trust his minutes in the long term. I would probably evaluate for now and watch from a distance. He's definitely very enticing, and he's got great underlying numbers from that performance against Wolves. Let's see if he can build upon that and show the consistency that Maresca has been asking for from that particular player. Now, despite the fixtures looking really promising, I'm not a big fan of Chelsea's defenders, but if he had to pick, maybe Robert Sanchez in goal could be a decent way of covering the Blues, or a Fofana/Colwill, but I don't see much in terms of bonus points, attacking potential from the centre-backs, and it wouldn't surprise me if Chelsea didn't keep that many clean sheets, because over the last 2 game weeks, they've conceded a lot of opportunities and haven't really looked solid whatsoever. Many people are surprised by the exodus that seems to be happening at Crystal Palace. The biggest shock of them all was Joachim Andersen to Fulham, but also Jordan Ayew to Leicester City. Elise joining Bayern Munich several months ago wasn't a big surprise, and Mark Gay is on the verge of joining Newcastle. It always seems like he's either staying or he's on the verge of leaving. There's no clear-cut answer to that transfer saga, but Dean Henderson will start in goal, and it will be a back three of Klein, Richards and Mark Gay in my opinion. Unfortunately, Chadi Riyad, the new signing, got injured in midweek in that 4-0 win over Norwich City, and I'm going for Munoz and Mitchell as the 2 wing-backs. That's very nailed on, and a midfield pivot of Wharton and Cheek Doucouré. I think that is Crystal Palace's best central midfield partnership, and Doucouré will be a massive boost to the Eagles. And I'm going for a front three of Kamada, Eze and Mateta, but Palace are going to sign Eddie Nketiah, and we could see him starting on the right-hand side, just like Edouard did in Game Week 2, and he could play alongside Mateta, with those two alternating from Game Week 4 and beyond. But I think Nketiah will probably make the bench in Game Week 3 against Chelsea away. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Edouard could also start over Kamada, but the Japanese international scored an early goal in that 4-0 win over Norwich City. Everton have suffered the most price decreases of any Premier League club so far this season. The entire defensive line has gone down in price. Pickford, Coleman, Tarkowski, O'Brien and Mikalenko. I think they'll go for that because something needs to change. They lost 3-0 against Brighton in the opening game week of the season and got thumped 4-0 by Tottenham Hotspur. I'm also going for a midfield 4 of Harrison, Idrissa Gana Gueye, Eric Bonham and McNeil, with Doucouré and Calvert-Lewin up front. But don't be surprised if Ndai comes in for possibly Eric Bonham and you see Doucouré being pushed back in central midfield alongside Idrissa Gana Gueye. Maybe a formation change could also help the Toffees to tighten up defensively and get some wins on board, because they need them desperately. They've got some great fixtures until December which could actually save them, but they need to get going very soon, otherwise they could be in big trouble this season. Calvert-Lewin is always linked with moves away and he might not stay at Everton for very long, but if he does, I think he'll start up front. Ndai could be the second striker, and ultimately we'll probably see one of Ghana or Doucouré in central midfield alongside Idrissa Gana Gueye. But I think Doucouré is one of the better midfielders despite going down in price to 5.4 million. Aston Villa away looks very tough, but it might be worth holding on to a Mikalenko or any Everton defender / Pickford because their fixtures until Game Week 14 look incredible. Fulham are one of two teams with no injury problems whatsoever, but that could change, of course, over the next few days before the Game Week 3 deadline. Leno will be in goal, and I'm going for a back four of Tete, Anderson, Bassi and Robinson. I think that will be the locked-in centre-back partnership for some time now, with Diop dropping to the bench. On the right, there's always doubts about Tete versus Castagna, but I think the Dutchman has the edge at this moment in time. I'm also going for a midfield pivot of Andres Pereira and Lukic, but new signing Sander Bird could take Lukic's place in that starting 11, and an attacking four of Adama Traore, Smith Rowe, Iwobi and Rodrigo Muniz up front. Jimenez also scored in midweek in the Carabao Cup, a 2-0 victory for Fulham, but my favourite assets from Fulham would be Robinson, Smith Rowe and Muniz, possibly in that order, although you could give the former Arsenal man the top spot in those rankings, and Joachim Andersen could go down in price to 4.4 million, but it's still worth holding on to him, especially over the next 4 game weeks. I could see 1 or 2 clean sheets there for Fulham. Ipswich Town had the baptism of fire against Liverpool at home and Man City away, but from this point onwards, the fixtures look much more appealing against Fulham, Brighton, Southampton and Aston Villa, although I do admit the Game Week 4 and 6 fixtures aren't particularly great. Muric has gone down in price to 4.4 million. He had a disastrous performance against Man City. He made one terrific save, but several errors leading to goals. And in my opinion, Muric is either brilliant or he's terrible because his distribution is very average at best, but he's a great shot stopper. So you never know what you're going to get from Muric, but on his day, he can make a lot of saves and get a lot of FPL points in the process. I'm going for a back four here of Johnson, Wolfenden, Greaves and Leif Davis, with Morsey and Luongo as the midfield pivot. Smodics on the right, he scored the opening goal against Manchester City last weekend. Hutchinson on the left and Chaplin down the middle. He scored in midweek for Ipswich Town, and Delap up front. That is my predicted lineup for Ipswich Town. I correctly predicted a back 5 against Man City and a back 4 against Liverpool, and I think they'll revert back to this 4-2-3-1 with Chaplin coming into the starting 11 once again. Leicester City is probably a no-go in terms of FPL assets at the moment. Wout Faes has gone up in price to 4.1 million, but he's linked with a move away, and apparently he wants to play as a right-sided centre-back and see someone signed to play alongside him in that central defence. But as things stand, it will be Hermansen in goal, Justin, Vestergaard, Wout Faes and Christensen as the back four, with Winks and Ndidi as the 2 protectors in front of them. Fatawu on the right is quite nailed on at the moment. Buonanotte has been very impressive so far in his loan spell from Brighton. And I'm going for De Cordova-Reid on the left, but I have to say, it wouldn't surprise me if he dropped to the bench for a Mavididi or maybe Jordan Ayew, who scored in midweek for Leicester City in the Carabao Cup. And I'm going for Jamie Vardy up front. The next 4 fixtures aren't great whatsoever. You've got Aston Villa and Arsenal in that period. I think the best fixture by far is Everton at home in Game Week 5. But as things stand with Leicester City, I would probably avoid them until the fixtures turn for the better. And that's where a few options like Fatawu, Vardy and possibly a 4 million defender can really come into play. Liverpool have just the one injury doubt in Curtis Jones, who is currently being assessed. I think they'll go for Alisson in goal, Trent, Konate, Van Dijk and Robertson, with Gravenberch, Szoboszlai and McAllister as the midfield 3, Salah, Diaz and Jota as the front 3, with the likes of Gakpo and Darwin Núñez making an impact off the bench. And Darwin is linked with moves away. Let's see if anything happens in the transfer window, and Liverpool still haven't signed anybody, which is very surprising, but they are heavily linked with Federico Chiesa. Let's see if they get a deal done in that position. But the next 4 fixtures look fantastic overall. I don't think United away is particularly great, but the Reds have done very well against the Red Devils in recent seasons, and this is one of the few teams you'd want to double or triple up on based on the fixtures and also the high ceiling of players like Salah, Jota and possibly even Diaz. But I think the best balance with Liverpool is going for 1 defender, and Trent of course would be the ideal pick, and then 2 attackers in Salah and Diogo Jota. I got Man City absolutely spot on in Game Week 1 and just the 1 incorrect prediction in Game Week 2, and I believe if Phil Foden wasn't ill in the build-up to that game against Ipswich Town, we could have seen a 100% success ratio in terms of predicting Pep Guardiola. But it's a small sample size. Over the course of the season, there will be many wrong when it comes to predicting Pep, because he is so difficult to predict at times, especially when other competitions come into play, like the Champions League, FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. But Ederson will be in goal, and I think Rico Lewis will continue to start on the right-hand side, but it might be only a matter of time until Kyle Walker pips him to that spot, and that could be after the international break. Diaz and Akanji is the preferred centre-back partnership at the moment, with Gavalio on the left. And I'm going for Bernardo Silva and Ilkay Gundogan as the midfield pivot because Kovacic picked up a small problem against Ipswich Town. Savio and Doku on the wings, with De Bruyne just behind Erling Haaland. Plenty of price increases for Man City players so far. Erling Haaland is now 15.1 million. The next 4 fixtures aren't that great, with Arsenal at home and Newcastle away on the horizon, but players like Haaland, De Bruyne can still do extremely well, as they showed last season, particularly in that Newcastle fixture for Kevin De Bruyne. West Ham away is a great fixture for Erling Haaland, and Brentford at home could be fairly decent as well. So Man City, let's see how things change over the next few months. Rotation will be imminent, but just before the international break, I think they'll go for a settled 11 and not make many changes from the first 2 game weeks. Surprisingly, it's the other side of Manchester I found more difficult to predict so far because they have so many options in the forward positions and they're going for Bruno Fernandes up front and Mason Mount just behind him. But I think one of those attackers will be changed for this huge game against Liverpool at home. Onana will be in goal, and a back four of Mazraoui, Maguire, Martinez and Dalot is very likely, but the only possible change would be De Ligt in for Harry Maguire. Could there be a shift to a back 5 for this Liverpool game specifically? It's a possibility, but Ten Hag predominantly plays a 4-2-3-1 formation during his time at Manchester United. I'm going for a midfield pivot of Kobbie Mainoo and Casemiro. That seems fairly locked in. With Diallo on the right, he scored their only goal against Brighton. Garnacho on the left, Fernandes down the middle, just behind Marcus Rashford. But what we could see is Fernandes up front still, Mason Mount as the attacking midfielder for his pressing, and then Rashford dropping to the bench. But he has a great record against top 6 clubs, even Liverpool. So that's why I'm going for him in the starting 11. But he's had a very poor start to this Premier League season. After Liverpool, it's Southampton away, which looks very enticing, but then Crystal Palace and Tottenham, which aren't great fixtures. So it's quite mixed bag for Man United. I wouldn't necessarily buy their players just yet. And many people are selling Bruno Fernandes. He has gone down in price to 8.4 million. And the same goes for Garnacho, who hasn't started any games so far, and he's been very unlucky not to return. I mean, both of them have been extremely unlucky. Bruno Fernandes has some of the best underlying numbers in the Premier League. They are going to get a lot of returns this season. I would recommend them in the future, but in Game Week 3, it could be a time to sell these players and go back to them when the fixtures turn. Some things haven't changed from last season. Both Newcastle and Manchester United have 7 injury concerns at the moment, but Nick Pope will be between the sticks. I think Trippier will come in for Livramento, but this isn't absolutely locked in. I could be completely wrong about this, but the centre-back partnership will likely be Kraft and Dan Burn, with Fabian Schär still suspended. Lewis Hall on the left, he was benched in Game Week 2 against Bournemouth, so Lloyd Kelly could come in, and during midweek, Newcastle got the job done in the Carabao Cup, but it was Lewis Hall playing 90 minutes, and that could cause you some concerns about whether he will start against Tottenham at home. A midfield three of Bruno Guimaraes, Longstaff and Joelinton is very likely. Unfortunately, Joe Willock, who scored in the first minute or two against Nottingham Forest, is injured and he will be unavailable against Tottenham at home. Murphy, Gordon and Isak is the likely front three, but we could see Harvey Barnes start on the right-hand side. Anthony Gordon will definitely start no matter what, but there's something up with Newcastle. They're not playing their best football. They're getting decent results, but there's still a lot more to come from them. Maybe Tottenham at home will be the catalyst. They've scored 10 goals in the past 2 meetings against this opponent at St James's Park. Then it's Wolves away, which looks fairly decent. But then you've got Fulham and Man City. So the fixtures overall are quite mixed bag. I'd recommend keeping Gordon and Isak this week, then possibly selling them, but it's all a matter of timing, and if Newcastle don't improve, it might end up being a mistake keeping Anthony Gordon and Isak despite the Tottenham at home fixture. The only injury Nottingham Forest have is Danilo, with that horror injury he suffered in Game Week 1, and he should be back by the end of the year, possibly going into January. Sells will be the starting goalkeeper with a back four of Nico Williams, Milenkovic, Murillo and Aina, but Alex Moreno will be the starting left back over time, and it's just a matter of when that's going to happen. But Aina has played fairly well in the first 2 game weeks. In fact, he's the highest scoring defender Nottingham Forest have in FPL with 10 points. Sangari and Anderson will be the likely midfield pivot. Elanga, Gibbs-White, Hudson-Odoi and Chris Wood seem fairly locked in unless Nottingham Forest make another signing in these positions. The next 4 fixtures look quite good actually in terms of the FDR on the FPL website. Wolves at home is definitely one to target, but they were very good in the Carabao Cup this midweek against Burnley, a 2-0 victory there for Wolves, and Nottingham Forest lost on penalties against Newcastle. But I like the Wolves and Fulham fixtures. Liverpool away looks very tough. You definitely want to bench all your Nottingham Forest assets there, and I think Chris Wood will be a very popular sell in Game Week 4 for that particular reason. But I still think Nottingham Forest have some good FPL assets. I'm not a big fan of the defenders in the long term. Even Aina, especially with that rotation I expect with Alex Moreno. Southampton are one of the few teams I've got spot on across both game weeks, but I think they'll be difficult to predict from this point onwards. Cameron Archer scored a brace in a 5-3 win over Cardiff City away from home in the Carabao Cup, and even scored in the 94th minute, so we could see him take Brereton Diaz's place or possibly even Adam Armstrong. But I'm going for the same team at the moment. They've also signed Aaron Ramsdale from Arsenal, and he'll be the #1 goalkeeper. Will he start in Game Week 3? Possibly, so maybe it'll be Aaron Ramsdale in goal instead of McCarthy, and that could be wrong. And I've gone for Harwood Bellis, Stevens, Bednarek, with Sugawara and Walker-Peters as the 2 wing-backs, 3 midfielders in Smallbone, Downs and Aribo, and the 2 forwards at the moment of Armstrong and Brereton Diaz. But the 2 changes I would expect over the next few weeks are Aaron Ramsdale in goal and Cameron Archer up front. Keep your eyes peeled for the press conferences, particularly with Ange Postecoglou, because there's a few doubts about the starting 11. Udogie is at 75% chance of playing, and we'll see what Postecoglou says in his press conference. The same goes about Bentancur, who sustained that concussion against Leicester City in Game Week 1. He should be available now, but will he be in condition to start alongside Basuma or Pape Sarr? That remains to be seen. Now, Mickey van der Ven picked up a slight problem. I think it was a knee injury, but Postecoglou said he should be fine just a couple of days ago, and I'm not worried about that whatsoever. So I'm going for Vicario in goal, Borro, Romero, Van der Ven and Udogie. With Basuma and Sarr, we could see Bentancur start though. I think he's Spurs' best midfielder, particularly in these positions. I've gone for Johnson, Maddison, Son and Kulusevski, as Solanke isn't expected back until after the international break in the North London derby against Arsenal at home. So it would probably be Son down the middle and then Johnson and Kulusevski on the wings rotating with each other, and we could see a 4-2-3-1 formation. But Spurs did something quite different in that 4-0 win over Everton. They played a very offensive formation with Odobert starting. I don't think they'll do that against Newcastle, and if they do, that would be a huge mistake. I know Newcastle have been poor, but if they play that expansive against a quality team with those sorts of players, they could be really punished, as they have been in the last 2 meetings at St James's Park. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Tottenham's fixtures are pretty mixed bag, but after the Arsenal fixture, it does get much better for the Lily Whites. Just like Fulham, West Ham have no injury problems whatsoever, and I think Areola will start in goal with Wan-Bissaka on the right. He's been very impressive in the Carabao Cup and also in Game Week 2, and I think he could start over Vladimir Coufal, who also started in midweek in that competition. Todibo and Kilman as the centre-back partnership seems fairly nailed on, and Emerson Palmieri on the left-hand side with Soucek and Guido Rodriguez as the midfield pivot. I think Soucek is quite nailed on based on his form. He's getting a lot of opportunities at the moment and making some very impressive runs into the box, so he's definitely one to look at. No midfielder has got more shots than Thomas Soucek at this point of the season. Jarrod Bowen scored in that 2-0 win over Crystal Palace. Lucas Paqueta is one of their better players, and the same goes for Kudus on the left, who has been disappointing and has thus suffered a price decrease to 6.4 million. And I think Fulkrug will finally start, but I have predicted him to start in Game Weeks 1 and 2, and I've gotten that wrong. Let's see if things change in Game Week 3. To be fair, I think I changed it to Antonio in the end for Game Week 1, but I didn't learn my lesson for Game Week 2, it seems. Man City at home is a very tough fixture, but afterwards, the fixtures do get much easier, and I could see the likes of Bowen, Kudus being great FPL assets, especially for their price points, and I would still be interested in an Areola in goal. The 20th and final team covered today is Wolves, who have some pretty mixed bag fixtures still. Nottingham Forest away looks pretty decent in Game Week 3, but afterwards you've got Newcastle, Aston Villa and Liverpool, so just avoid Wolves assets for now, especially after that 6-2 defeat against Chelsea last weekend. Jose Sarr will be in goal, but there could be even more changes to the backline and the team in general than what I'm predicting. I'm going for Doughty, Mosquera and Craig Dawson with Ait Nouri on the left. Joao Gomez and Lamina is one of the better parts about this team. Hwang Hee-chan, Cunha, Rodrigo Gomez and Strand Larsen could be the front four, but Wolves have several options like Chiquinho, Sarabia, and a few others like Bellegarde who could still start in this team. So maybe there's one or two inaccuracies with this squad, and I do hold my hands up about that. But after a 6-2 defeat, it's difficult to predict the starting 11 because Gary O'Neill might feel inclined to make several changes. It could even be wholesale, so let's see how that goes. But they got a very important 2-0 win over Burnley in midweek. With Guedes scoring a brace, maybe he'll get into the starting 11 or at least make a cameo off the bench and knock on the door for a starting spot. So with Wolves, don't go for any of their assets right now. Mosquera is a formula defender to look at, but they need to improve defensively as soon as possible. That concludes the predicted lineups for Game Week 3. A few things could change after the press conferences on Thursday and Friday. At the time of this recording, the only press conference that has happened is Ursula from Brighton. So just bear that in mind, and we can update each other in the comment section, and keep your eyes peeled for the deadline stream, because in the last 2 editions I have showed updated lineups in those live streams, which can be very useful, and those are my final predictions for the lineups in Game Week 3. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this video to 300 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the channel memberships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, which I showed you at the beginning of this video, and check out my Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to supporting my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 3 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.